Welcome to another episode of Find Your Free, the podcast. I am your hostess, Rachel Voss, and this is actually a very long overdue episode of Find Your Free. I think the last time that I was on this mic, it was June. I think that's the last episode I released. And I gave an update of where I was in my life at the time and that I would be on a brief hiatus while I rested my vocal cords and prepared for this big move to Georgia. My family moved from Maryland to Georgia over the summer in August, and I'd said, I'm going to be on this brief hiatus. I'm just going to kind of get my vocal cords together. I've been teaching a lot of yoga over the past year. I took on this podcast, and there was some stress to my vocal cords, and I needed to get some rest and some vocal therapy. And between that and the move, I said, okay, I'll be on this brief hiatus, but I'll be back. I had also shared how my dad had been suffering through dementia at the time, and was just navigating that journey in that space. In either that episode where I shared about his dementia, or maybe there was another episode, or maybe I never shared, I don't know. It's been like 6 months, right? I had shared how last year, in late May, early June, my dad had suddenly suffered a brain bleed. And he was in the hospital for some time. He had to, have some surgery done to remove the brain bleeding. Was very nervous about, his life and where he was at that time. And, the pandemic, we weren't able to be at his bedside in the hospital and, all of that stuff. And so there was just a lot of worry, but he made it through. And, he was able to come home and was in good spirits. But then we began to notice just some shifts in his cognitive functions, and then so began a decline. And ultimately, we were in the world of dementia. And so going through that journey was also very tough behind the scenes. And so was dealing with all of that, and had been wanting to get back to podcasting for a while. The space is really therapeutic for me. I am naturally gifted to talk, if you haven't figured that out about me by now. But it's really a therapeutic space for me, just to be able to freely talk through where I am and, what's going on in my life, and to just share, about yoga teaching and life and, just all of the things, right? And so this space, this space is a really therapeutic space for me. So I had been looking forward to getting back on this mic, and, just catching up. And, especially since I wasn't teaching, I definitely had to pause on teaching because of the projection of my vocal cords. And it was recommended that I take vocal therapy, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet. So I was like, all right, I'm going to pause on teaching, but I definitely want to, get back to podcasting when I can. Excuse me. And life just continued to be life. We moved to Atlanta, or Georgia rather, the Atlanta metropolitan area. And, we're just getting settled, and the kids starting a new high school. And, we're just figuring all of life out. And so the more life happened, the further I got away from this microphone. But, I got to a place where I was like, all right, it's time. It's time for me to sit down and, just get back to it. And usually I like to give myself freedom to just be. So I'll sit down and podcast when I have an open morning, or if I'm doing it on a weekend or something like that. But I just like to give myself space, just in case, I don't like the way it sounds, and I need to go back and re-record, or if something happens, or just whatever. I just like to give myself space. I don't want to have time constraints. But it is 9:15 on Monday, December 13th, 9:15 a.m. And I have a meeting at 10 o'clock that I need to handle. And I'm going to try to record this and make it in time for my meeting. And again, with having the gift to talk, I could talk for an hour straight if you let me, but I don't know. It was just on my heart, and I was just like, I want to get this done. I feel it. I'm just going to sit down in front of this mic, and I'm going to talk, and I'm going to make this 10 o'clock meeting. So, So initially I was thinking, again, I just kind of sit down and just give this update. But my life has shifted in a really, really, really big way since I last recorded, right? So I thought again, like, I was just going to give this overview, of life in Georgia and just kind of where I am, in my work and on my path and stuff. And so maybe I'll update a little bit. So again, we moved in August. We moved from Maryland. I lived in Maryland for 20 years, originally a Jersey girl. Will always be a Jersey girl, proudly. But I moved to Maryland in 2000, and my life wrapped up there this past summer. So I guess 21 years, right? 2021. I moved there in August of 2000, and I moved out in August of 2021. So there you go. And I had a condo that I'd purchased in 2003 that I was living in for a long time, rented for a while when I was married. It was the place where I healed myself after my divorce and going through all of that. And it was where I raised Voss as a young kid, as a single mom. And so this one bedroom with the loft condo was like everything to me. But just with moving and the length of time of having the condo, and honestly the real estate market, just all of these different factors, kind of were in place. And I just decided, all right, it's time to sell my condo, and just, not have to manage that while I'm managing this brand new life in Georgia. And take the proceeds from that, right, and use that to start my new life, set up some things for Voss, all that good stuff. And so I had the really good fortune of renting out the condo 3 years prior. So from 2018, I rented out the condo to a yoga student / friend, who was looking to move in with her man, at the same time that David and my guy and I were looking to move in together. So we found our place. I rented my place to my yoga student and her dude, really cool dude. And and we were just living. And then her life shifted this year. They got pregnant and needed to, expand their space. So they moved out of the condo and into their new home, and had their beautiful baby, and got engaged, got married, just all this good stuff. So they had all this stuff happening and they needed the space. So that left the condo open. And originally I was going to rent it again, but just looking at the market and, thinking about trying to manage it, from this new place in Georgia, thinking about a lot of things, capital gains, just a lot of things, right? I just said, I just felt it. I was like, it's time to move on. It's time to let it go. And, the condo, it was like my first baby. I purchased that condo when I was 26 and I was so proud to do that, I remember my dad advising me, like, you get a 30-year fixed. At the time when I bought my condo, 2003, like, the market was in this place where there were just like all types of mortgages all over the place, a lot of predatory lending, all of that going on. And interestingly enough, I was working in the housing finance market at the time. And so there was just a lot of that going on. And so my dad, just really sensible guy, that he could be, was just like, 30-year fix, nothing else. Don't get these adjustable rates. Don't get this. Don't get a 30-year fix. Okay, Dad. So listen to my dad. My mom was with me, when I signed the papers and got the condo. So it was just a really proud moment for me at 26 to have a condo. I had my master's degree. I had, this career, and, my life was just in that place at that time, right? Excuse me. And so so I had that condo for a long time. It was my first baby until, Voss came along in 2007. And it just, I took a lot of pride in it. I took a lot of pride that I had like this asset, that I had planned on keeping that condo forever initially and was going to pass it down to Voss. And it just felt like, just no matter what, like, I have this thing for myself, especially as a woman. And I just took a lot of pride in that. So it really, I really had to get my heart into the place where it was like, okay, it's time to sell it. Like, it wasn't just for a money thing. It really was like, let me look at everything on the table and weigh it all out. And it really just made sense, if you know what I mean. So I decided to, okay, I'm gonna sell this condo. And I happened to mention, to yoga student friend, that I was going to sell it, I was going to put it on the market. And she's like, well, listen, if you are interested in selling it, I'd be interested in being a buyer. And it was just like, okay. And so we just started to work out that process, and that aligned. And that was really cool because I was in the market as a buyer. We were in the market as a buyer looking for a place, moving to Georgia, and it was insane. And I talked about that in a previous episode, just being in the market at that time. And so I kind of didn't want to deal with all of that madness as a seller either, like just having people in and out and people competing, and I'll pay like this much over and da 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 da. Like I kind of didn't want to do that. I know from a capitalistic perspective that might have been like the smart thing to do, but from my heart, I was just like, energy, I don't know. So having this private sale meant that I was making my place less competitive in price, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And, it totally worked out for me financially, and it's still a blessing like either way, but it felt like the right thing to do. It felt like, even though I bought it as a primary residence, it was a home that I bought for myself, and it was going to be more of a, rental property, investment property for my friend. It became that for me. And so it felt really good passing it on in that spirit, and passing it on to someone I knew, and passing it on to another Black woman, and passing it on to another Black woman who'd had a son and now was creating, for her son what I intended on creating for Voss. And so it just felt like the right thing to do in that way. So we went through the private sale, and that was a blessing, went smoothly. And so I sold my condo. And that took place just as we were pulling out of Maryland and coming down to Georgia. And so for those who may be new to this podcast or who maybe missed the previous episode, when I talked about our move, what facilitated the move was my son starting high school, and he got into a really nice private school just outside of Atlanta. So one of the little areas outside of Atlanta. But Atlanta proper. So people say Atlanta like he's in one of those areas. When we say we're in Atlanta and then we tell people where we really live, they're like, oh no, you're not really in Atlanta. But my kid, Voss, he goes to school in an area that would be considered quote unquote Atlanta, So my brother has been down in the Atlanta area for the past couple of years, and he's really been trying to get like the whole family to come down, like, oh, you got to come, property and business, and just so many different opportunities. And my mom had wanted to come down. I'm just like, no, Jersey girl, Maryland is as far south as I go. Like I thought Atlanta was a cool city, but just not like the city for me, right? So all these years he's nudging and trying to convince, and it's just like, no, 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 no. So my son was in a really good and blessed to have had the opportunity, but my son was in a Montessori school in 8th grade at the time. And it was a school that went into high school. So it was kind of like the plan, like, okay, he's here and this is where he's going to go until he graduates. But my brother ended up telling me like, oh, you should check out this school, in the Atlanta area. It's a really good school. A lot of families try to get their kids in. You should just try it. You should check it out. So we checked it out, and this was like in February of this year. We just so happened to check it out when they were having like the informational sessions and, trying to recruiting efforts and such. And their deadline for like admissions was sometime in March. So we do like this virtual, tour and admissions thing. And we decide together, my son and I, like, okay, this school is cool. Let's just check it out and see. We were in the process at the time of looking at places to move in Maryland. And again, with the craziness of the market, we just weren't finding things that worked, financially, things that made sense. So we were just like, we'll just throw, this to the wall and see what sticks. I knew my kid could get in. I didn't think necessarily Atlanta would stick. I just didn't think that was part of my plan. So yada, yada, yada. I've been binge watching Seinfeld lately. My kid gets in and we decide, all right, well, let's go with it. Let's make the move. So we made that move in August, and the place that we ended up securing to live wasn't ready like when we got here in terms of like when Voss had to start school and us moving. So we had to get down here at a certain time. So our place wasn't ready in time for Voss to start school. So we did an Airbnb for 2 weeks. Our stuff is in a pod. Our house pretty much is in a pod the whole time. But sitting in the driveway, of the place we were moving into. And then 2 weeks into moving to the Atlanta area, 2 weeks into August, we were finally able to like move into the place. And get settled and all of that. We saw the place. We got the place sight unseen. We only saw it in like pictures and video. Shout out to our realtor. And so it was definitely like, okay, where are we going? And so, it wasn't, I'll admit, I wasn't like in love at first, you know what I mean, in terms of the reality versus the pictures. But, I got myself together and I'm like, this, whatever the case, this is our first home, in Georgia, and we're going to fill it with love and make it work. So that's what we have been doing for the most part, filling this place with love and trying to make it work. And so the kid is adjusting well to high school, to his new school. He loves the school, and we're happy with it. He's right now in the process of having midterms. It's his first round at the rodeo, with taking midterms. So he's all like, oh my God, all this studying and stuff. And I'm like, you'll be fine. And he will be. So, but I'm really proud of him for how he has just really taken to all of this change, just moving out of state, starting high school, making new friends. And the school he was in for 8th grade, that was a new school for him. So doing it back to back, like I'm really, really proud of him just for how he's been navigating this whole thing. So, and so then we have our dog. So it's me, Dave, Voss, and our dog, Frenchie. And I don't think I shared this in the last podcast because I don't even think we were aware. As a matter of fact, I'm sure we weren't aware. But along with my dad having dementia, our dog Frenchie started to have or started to show some really major signs of cognitive decline. So she is a senior dog that we adopted 6 years ago. I didn't realize she was a senior. I wanted to adopt a trained dog and like an adult dog, not a puppy. But when we got her, she was a senior. Like when I took her to the vet, they didn't know, like they couldn't tell exactly what her age was. I thought you could tell a dog by their teeth, but they were like, no, we can't at least. And she was like a stray dog found in like West Virginia and then made her way to like a rescue agency in Virginia, which is where I found her. And so they said, oh, no, she's an older dog. She's somewhere between like 6 and 8 probably. So we had a senior dog, but she was still active and, just doing dog things and all of that, jumping, running after other dogs, squirrels, all the good stuff. And then just over the years, she's like, stops barking, or she'll start pacing, or she'll just start doing these little things. And she's always been an anxious dog. And so we tend to just write it off as that, like, yeah, she's definitely been through some trauma. She showed indications of that from whatever her past life was. And, she's just always had like just anxious tendencies. So just different things she's done that are really weird for a dog. We're like, that's just Frenchie, just being anxious. But we just started kind of putting all of these things together, and it really picked up when we moved here to Georgia. So she handled the move beautifully as far as like the long drive in the car and all of that. She handled that beautifully. She handled even like her first couple of days here beautifully. She had all this space that we didn't really have in Maryland, big backyard, all of this. And then one night she just started like howling and wailing and just doing all types of just weirdness. And, it was just a lot. And so I'm, doing the Google search and I'm like, okay, I learned about cognitive canine disorder, AKA dementia. So Frenchie has dementia too. And it has just been a real decline. And a lot of caretaking. It's been actually a little bit of a traumatic experience. It's like 24-hour care. It's if anybody out there has a senior dog or has lived with a senior dog, like, you know what I'm talking about. And this is my first time. I had a dog once when I was little, but it was very brief. And excuse me, my mom like gave it away. That was a laugh. My mom like gave it away one weekend when I was at my dad's house, and then I came back and like the dog was gone. But I've never had a dog like at the end years of its life, right? So this is my first experience with like, with like a senior dog. And so I just kind of thought dogs got old and just sort of died. I didn't know, like, I just never thought about them getting dementia or this or that, right? So a lot of care. There are things we could spend thousands of dollars on in terms of neurological testing. We're not doing that. We're just trying to make her comfortable. And, we took her to the vet recently and they told us like, yeah, you're at that place where you can make the choice of putting her down. or just trying to, let her hang on a little bit more. And she still, even though a lot of things are different, she loses, like, she can't really see, she can't hear. That's been for a while. But, she walks around in circles a lot. She gets lost a lot. She has like vertigo, her head's leaning. So there's just like all of that going on. But she still has like a really healthy appetite. And so I'm just like, well, as long as she's eating, that's been my sign. Like, if when she gets to a point where she stops eating, then we'll deal. But as long as she's eating, then like we'll just keep going unless she's just completely miserable. And she seems to be happy when she's outside. Unfortunately, the Georgia weather has held up such that we can like let her hang out outside for like hours, and just let her like walk around and stuff. So yeah, so managing this dog, and that again, it's been traumatic in a lot of ways. It's been a real lesson in compassion and patience, and it's just been an experience. There was a point in time where like I was really interested in getting another dog, like as a companion to Frenchie, and then to have eventually when Frenchie would pass on, and I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this again with the dog. And if you ask Voss, he wants a cat, but I'm not really a cat person, and that's for another episode. So so as far as like my work and teaching and yoga and all of that, I've taught 2 classes. One was a private class for the community that has been with me since the pandemic started, so since March of 2020. And I just wanted to hold some space to give them an update of where I was like at the time. This was like a very private class I held. I think it was like in September, maybe like 10, 15 folks. And, we did some gentle movement together, caught up, had some conversation. So I did that. And then that gave me the mojo to hold a public class, like a public offering where I'm, promoting it and listing it on Eventbrite, and people can sign up and all this stuff. So I held that class on Halloween morning, had about 25 people, really great response. It felt really good to be back in the mix. I have not gone for the vocal therapy yet, just because that came up right in the midst of us moving, and I just didn't have the opportunity to like line up with a vocal therapist in Maryland, and I haven't really had the opportunity yet to find a vocal therapist here in Georgia. But not using my voice as much, like just really being mindful about how I use my voice, has helped a lot, because I actually can feel a difference in like my throat, but I'm still going to do the therapy and figure that out when I get a little space in life. So I held that class on Halloween, excuse me, and that gave me the mojo, like, to be back. Like, okay, I may not teach, 5-6 days a week again, but I may try to do, the Saturday thing, maybe once a week. Like, I just started kind of finding my spark again. Because honestly, and from the heart, just like with my dad having been in the condition he was in, and seeing him, before I left, was really, really hard. And just Frenchie, just all of it, the move, it just felt like a lot. And my inner flame, just creatively, healer, teacher-wise, like all of that just felt really low. Like the pilot was turned down really low. And I felt like I had gotten that spark, like, okay, I'm back. And that was October 31st. That was a couple of days after my birthday, October 27th, a birthday I also share with my dad. So I'm like, okay, we're going to get back into the mix. And then 2 weeks later, on November 10th, my father passed away. And, I kind of knew we were in that ballpark, because the dementia took such a hold of him that it just really robbed my father of who he was, and in a very quick kind of way. And I realized a lot of the reason why my pilot was low was because I was dealing with that, like losing my father. And, fortunately, I don't feel guilt about having moved to Georgia. He was in New York in the middle of this. Like, I talked to him at one point before it got really bad, And he told me, like, you got to go, kid. Like, this is a great opportunity for Voss. Like, you got to live your life. Like, I've lived my life. You got to go. And, just feeling like that blessing from him, I'm like, all right, I got to do this. And so I saw him before I left, and he was at a point where he wasn't able to be at home anymore. So I saw him in the home where he was, and it just was like, this is not good. And I shared that, I think, in the last episode. I think the last episode I recorded, or the episode before that, I'm pretty sure I shared that. And how, when I left that visit, he looked me right in my eyes. And at this point, the conversation was very, very, very limited. And it was difficult because, like, my dad is like, I just love talking to him. He had the best humor, the best wit, the best off-color jokes, like totally inappropriate stuff you could not say outside of, he's like George Carlin and Bill Maher and, who's the other guy? It's escaping me right now. George Burns, like, he's just one of those kind of guys, right? And could just tell a story and knew so much, and just, was just my hero in so many ways. And so to not have that with him was just a difficult process. And so to the limited conversation was just, it was just super difficult. And so, before I left that visit, he looked me right in my eyes and said, I love you, sweetie. And I said, I love you too, Daddy, and just immediately like burst into tears, right? And then he had to go back to his room. I think it was like lunchtime or whatever. And so I left that visit, and Voss was with me because I just felt like, Voss, I don't know when you're going to see your granddad again, or if you are, so you need to come with me on this visit. And it was hard because it was like I was so vulnerable, the tears, the emotion, just the overwhelm of the moment, like, and I'm mindful of my 14-year-old son sitting next to me, and I'm like, I can't collapse in front of him, but I collapsed, and he's rubbing my back like, it's okay, Mom. And looking back, I'm glad he was there, because it's life, and he saw life happening in that moment. And so I just kind of knew, I would say, like, okay, we're in the final chapter. It's just a matter of when and how it ends. And, that chapter came to an end 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks after our birthday. Our birthday was on a Wednesday. He died on a Wednesday. And subsequently, when I put in the birthday of the year he was born on a Wednesday. So I'm like, wow, Dad came in on a Wednesday and left on a Wednesday. And, it was 4:15 in the afternoon. I was on my way to picking up Voss from school. And, my stepmom, Terry, called, and, she's just like, Rach, he died. He died at 3:20 p.m. So just about an hour before I got in the call. And in that moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe, but I was literally like 5 minutes from meeting Voss. And, and so again, it's like, I got to get it together, right? So I was okay when he got in the car, although he looked at my face and he's like, Mom, what's wrong? And then I was just like, your grandfather, like, he died. And, he just looked like, not shocked, but just like, okay, wow, so this is what that is, And he really just went into immediate support mode for me. And we had about a 40-minute ride back to the house where we live. Is kind of far from his school. And that felt like the longest drive ever, because I just wanted to get to the place where I could just really collapse. And so, I called David and told him, and, so I get home and he's waiting, at home for me with the hug. And then I just went to a place where I was just like, I just need to be by myself. And, it wasn't like a shock, like, in him having the brain bleed was the shock. You know what I mean? Like, the determination of the dementia was the shock. Like, seeing him over the summer was the shock, right? So it's not like he was fine yesterday and he passed away today, right? So it wasn't a shock like in that way, but it was just like, what the fuck? My father died, And it's now been 33 days. And I don't know. I'm just getting through. Some days I've been okay. I can get up and I'm moving and I'm smiling and I'm thinking about dad and all of that. And some days it just feels like, what the fuck? Like, how's my father gone? Immediately I took myself to the place of gratitude because, I'm 44 now, and getting to this point, you have friends whose parents died early. You have friends who never knew their dad. There's just so many different life situations, right? So I know I'm fortunate to have made it to 44 and have had my dad in my corner the whole time. The whole time. He was one of my best friends. He was my advisor. He was just somebody who really, really got me. And from the heart, I feel really vulnerable. I'm in a relationship with a really great guy. And I don't know, there's no other way to say it, but it's like he doesn't belong to me, though. He doesn't belong to me. And he takes care of me because he chooses to, and he takes care of us, and he looks after me and Voss because he chooses to, but he doesn't belong to me, right? My father made me feel like I belonged to him because I was his daughter. And there's just not enough time to get into everything that has been like the experience of what I've learned about my dad since his passing, like things that just make sense of who I am and how I was, and how I'm just like, as this kid, just full of fucking love, man. I was a happy kid. I was a happy kid. And I learned that my dad carried a lot. But I made him so happy. Like, I made him happy. And he just made me feel like I was his. And I knew he had my back. And I took so much pride in that. Don't fuck with me, man. My father, you know? And I have brothers who go to the ends of the earth for me, and I know that. But it's just different. As a daughter, it's just different. And I feel super vulnerable in that way. But I'm really grateful because there were no unanswered questions between me and my dad. I mean, there's things that I wish I could ask him now and all that stuff, and things you learn after the fact. But as far as like how he and I were, it was an open book. We've had arguments. I've stormed out on him, but that's my guy. It's my dad, and he was proud of me, and I was proud of him, and I will always be proud of him. And I'm just really grateful I had him. And so I just took myself to that place of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for his life. Thank you for giving him to me and me to him. And how fucking special that I was given to him and he was given to me on the same day, October 27th. So, now I have my stepmom and my mom. And I just want to give Terry the biggest loving shout out. That's my stepmom, for everything she did to help my dad navigate this process. I always tell her, for everything she's told me, I know there's 10 things that she hasn't, in terms of, how she navigated the process. But she is my inspiration for yoga. She's the one that I got it from. And seeing how she has anchored herself with her practice, not even just the movement on the mat, but just the mindset, the awareness, the allowing, the compassion, that's the yoga. And that's what I always teach in my classes, and I'm sure I've shared in a million of these podcasts, or the 23 that I recorded before this, like what we do on the mat physically is important, you know what I mean? Moving and getting the blood flowing and stretching and just taking care of the body in that way is important, but it's what that movement facilitates. It's release, it's awareness, it's, when you're sitting in a posture and it's challenging you and you're like, why does this yoga teacher have me holding fucking chair or chaturanga for 10 breaths? Why? Because when your parent dies or your dog dies or somebody goes away or something happens unexpected and you feel like, what the fuck? That's where those 10 breaths in chaturanga come in. That's where those just sitting in the posture, that's where that comes in. When you have to just sit and be with the shit, that's where the work comes in. And so, being able to connect with Terry in that way has just been a blessing for both of us. She calls us partners in grieving, and we are. We both shared my dad's heart in a special way, as did my nieces, his granddaughters, and as did everybody who had their relationship with my dad. But, me and stepmama got our thing. And so it's just really beautiful and a blessing that we can connect. And my mom, when I told her, and it was hard, she and my dad got divorced when I was young, 5, 6, 7. And, I didn't really know them together, but when she shared like their stories and their time, and she said, that's just a moment in my life. Like, here I was, this, Black girl from Texas living up in New York, doing, being a social worker, going after my career. She had already been married. She had my 3 brothers from that first marriage. And, she's like, God, this white hippie guy with long hair. Like, you're right. But they connected, right? And she said, that's like a moment nobody can ever take from me. And as a 44-year-old woman, I can really understand and appreciate that. And so it's just, there's gratitude, for my dad's life, gratitude for Terry, who he brought into my life, gratitude for my mom, and I'm surviving a little bit better than I thought I would. The fear of losing a parent was like something that plagued me for a long time, and now here I am. But now there's also like, it's like, okay, I can make it and I have the tools, but there's also now this heightened fear around my mom and this heightened fear around my stepmom, and like I just want to wrap them in bubble wrap. And will I be able to manage with them the same way I'm managing with my dad, right? Like I'm all in my head with that shit now. And again, that's where the practice comes in, just being mindful and being aware and just noticing all of the things and all of the emotions. And so that's where I am right now. And mindful of the time, I got about 10 minutes before my meeting, and now I wish I had more time, but I really wanted to honor the spirit of where I was. And there's something that I want to share before I close out, a passage I want to share. So I will be back. It was good for me to just do this and sort of initially get this update out. I honestly don't know what's next for me. The pilot, you know what I mean? That inner flame is still a little low, and I know I gotta nurture that right now, and I gotta just really, a lot of self-care. Here we are, holiday time, and for me, fortunately, the holidays don't overwhelm me or anything like that. So I'm just really looking forward to like the kids' school being closed for 2 weeks and just not having to do the rush of back and forth and pick up and all that stuff. And my part-time gig will be closed for like a week. And so it'll just be nice to have time to just sort of, just settle and sit and be. So, I'm going to allow myself that, but I don't know what's next. I do feel like I know that this is going to inform and impact my work in a big way going forward, but I'm just not sure just yet what that work looks like. So we will see. But that's where I am right now. And that's why I call this episode, and then there were 2. I was always blessed. I've been blessed. I will always be blessed to have had what I call the big three. And I know I mentioned that in another episode. My dad, my mom, and my stepmom. And now there are two. And, life goes on. So this passage that I want to share today is from a book called Prayers of Honoring Grief by Pixie Lighthorse. And just thought it was the right thing to share, to end this podcast with. And this passage is called Honoring Loss of a Loved One. Thank you for this day of profound mourning. Shroud me in the gloomy garments of bereavement. Drape me in a graying shawl of longing for the one who no longer resides in this world. Make my spirit aware of the transmissions that take place when an earth body becomes light. Help me to honor my person and what they meant to me. Let me look as shabby as I feel, releasing concerns of what others may think of me. Help me embody the darkness I feel over what has been lost. Show me how to make a ceremony for this occasion. Help me be present for these feelings in a way that is healing for me. Remind me that it is natural for one big blow to unleash the hoarded sufferings of my past. Point me to demonstrations of how my people grieve their beloveds for centuries before now. Show me what I can do for my familiars. March me to the mounded graves. Let me make the sacred sounds of this great misery I carry, blood-curdling and guttural. Help me release my fears about future losses, but let me cling to loving life while I am living it. Find me uncrippled by mistrust of nature's divine processes of reclaiming, but designate ample space to churn with agitation. When I've lost one I love and I'm on my knees, let me place my agonies at your altar in the woods. Send in the winds to flurry my distress toward the source. Let me hold precious the memory of those who have crossed over by letting them be part of me. Ferry my howls across the seas to connect with all those who are aching with loss. Hear our sorrowful voices mingling in one powerful wailing song. Let the stars absorb my lamentations tonight. So there's still so much more. I completely forgot to share how I went to Puerto Rico as the culmination of this rites of passage program I was in, and all of the work of ancestral work of working with our ancestors that I learned during this rites of passage, and how that too has helped to anchor me and help me navigate this process with my dad. Just really being able to find that space within myself of he's still with me, and just really more about how I've been navigating this process of grief, the tools I've been using. So there is a lot more to share. So there will be another episode. But again, I just wanted to move with the spirit of sharing this update. It's probably just as well that I don't do too much in one episode. So breaking up the grief journey is probably good for me. And so, that's where I am. So I'm going to go take a deep breath, splash some cold water on my face, throw on a proper shirt to be on camera for my meeting. And just thank you to everyone who has just been on this journey with me, whether as a yoga student, a mentee, maybe you follow me on Instagram, maybe you've listened to these podcasts, maybe you already knew my dad passed away and you sent me a loving, kind word or just a thought, a prayer. The love has really, really, really helped to carry me through this space, and I'm so just grateful for that. There's so much that I've learned and continue to learn in the space of grief, and there's so much more that I know I will continue to learn. And so just thank you to everybody who's hung in there with me, the students who have told me, we'll wait until you get back. We'll be here when you get back, whenever you're ready to start teaching. Thank you for holding space for me. My dad, one of the things I admired most about him was his integrity and just how he believed that everybody had the right, deserved to be happy and deserved kindness, and compassion. And he taught that to me and to those who loved him. So if I could leave you with anything today, just be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. You don't know what people are carrying on their journey, no matter how much they may be smiling. Move in compassion. Be good to yourself, be good to others. And until then, may you be peaceful. May you be easeful. May you be useful. May you be joyful. The light in me honors the light in each of you. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you again soon.